We're back at the 15th annual Big Beers, Belgians, and Barley Wines Festival, and we're here at the Vale Cascade Resort and Spa, and we're speaking with Patrick Dawson. He's the author of a new book called Vintage Beer, about aging big beers. Patrick, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jim.
So tell me about this. We're at the Big Beers Festival, so it would seem like, if you're going to age a beer, one of these here would be an ideal candidate, or several. Tell me about this.
Yeah, so I think there's really three categories of beers that are going to be able to age well. I like to say it has to have one of the three S's. It needs to be strong, sour, or smoked. And what those components do, the acidity or the high alcohol or the smoke phenols, is they essentially act as a preservative that slows the aging of the beer and sort of enables some of these vintage flavors that people love so much in these cellared beers to develop. So yeah, big beers are right there. It's the number one thing. Strong beers, barley wines, Belgian quads, imperial stouts, age fantastically.
And so how can you expect a big beer to change over, say, a year, 2 or 3 years?
Probably the biggest thing that you're going to see right off the bat in the first year or two is going to be that alcohol component that's usually pretty prominent up front. It oftentimes be kind of hot or boozy, is really going to mellow. And as it mellows, it actually is, what's mellowing it is its oxidation, and it turns into what are called aldehydes. And there's a million different kinds of aldehydes with different flavors, but in general they're always sweet tasting. So caramel, molasses, amaretto, things like that. So kind of look for the beer to mellow the alcohol presence a little bit and develop some sweet new characteristics to add some complexity.
Great. One beer that I had kind of sitting around and I didn't even realize it was a Maharaja from Avery. And that thing is just a head full of hops. But after 2 or 3 years, those hops tend to drop off a bit. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's one of the really important things to understand about aging beers is hop presence, and that's hop bitterness, that's hop flavor, hop aroma. They're all going to disappear over time, and it kind of varies beer to beer how quickly they change. But it's just something really important to keep in mind, because if there's a beer that is hop-centric, Maharaj is a great example. You have to ask yourself, what is that beer going to taste like when those hops are gone? And is it still going to be a good beer? And oftentimes the answer to that question is no. So that's why you usually don't want to age IPAs and beers like that.
Okay. And as far as aging a beer, tell me how you would where you'd want to store it, how you'd want to store it. Do you lay them down or keep them standing up if they have a cap on them?
Yeah. So probably the biggest thing is going to be temperature. Ideally 55 degrees. If you have any way to manage that, that's great. But oftentimes people don't have that other capability. I'm lucky enough, I have a root cellar at my house that stays a really nice constant temperature. So if you have anything like that, a crawl space or any sort of underground thing, that's a great way to go. Next would be some sort of like a wine refrigerator or something where the temperature is controllable. And if you don't have any of those at your disposal, just some sort of interior to your house closet, like a coat closet that's going to stay a relatively constant temperature is a good way to go. The next one is light. Make sure you keep it away from light. Everyone knows that about beer for the most part, but it's so important for a beer that's going to be sitting out for years. Just the littlest amount of light can eventually lead it to skunk. As far as bottle orientation, that's probably, if there's a controversial topic in aging beer, that is the one. A lot of people look to lambic producers of Belgium because they have a style that is basically required to be aged. It's basically a vintage beer as soon as you can buy it. And they store all of their bottles on their sides. And a lot of people sort of follow that example, say, well, hey, if the Belgians do it, why not? But I think the problem is a lot of people just don't have the orientation to be able to store a bunch of bottles on their sides. It's set up that way at the Belgian breweries, but not so much for us. So I like to store bottles upright. There's not a whole lot of chemical reasons to store it on their sides. Probably the biggest one is going to be corks, right? If you keep it on your side, the corks are going to stay moist and they're going to keep them from drying out. So if your cellar is a very dry area, it probably is worthwhile to maybe put them on their sides, corked bottles only, or maybe wax the cork, something to make sure that cork doesn't dry out. But otherwise, I stand them upright just because logistically it's easier.
Now, with wines, there are certain vintages. Real quick, do you have one or two vintages and types of beer that have aged really well that you'd want to look out for?
Yeah, one of the classic ones is going to be Santa Claus, which is brewed I won't even try and pronounce their name, but they're out of Austria. It's kind of like an Austrian barley wine, and it's just proven to age beautifully. It's very easy to find. It's usually about $5 or so for a 12-ounce bottle, and it's a bit of a nightmare fresh. It tastes kind of like syrupy cough syrup. It's not good, but given 3 or 4 years, it mellows into this incredible drink with all sorts of dried fruits, molasses, caramel, like almost a hint of pipe tobacco. It could go toe to toe with some of the finest ports in the world, and I think that's an easy one to find, and it ages really well.
Excellent. Well, Patrick Dawson, thank you very much. He's the author of the new book, Vintage Beer, about aging big beers, and we are here at the 15th Annual Big Beer Belgian and Barley Wine Festival in Vail, Colorado, and at the beautiful Vail Cascade Resort and Spa. And thank you very much, Patrick.
Thanks for having me on, Jim.
And we'll see you out on the beer trail.